I'm done with this marriage. Leave my house now!
He chased his pregnant wife out of the house because he was no longer attracted to her, dismissing years of love for fleeting beauty. But what he didn't know was that her life and her heart would rise stronger than he ever imagined. The ending will shock you. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe to this channel so you won't miss our next interesting story. David Okoye's life looked perfect from the outside. His skyscraper apartment gleamed against the city skyline, reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. His sleek cars were parked in a row, each one a symbol of wealth and power. In boardrooms and social circles, his name commanded respect, whispered with admiration and envy in equal measure. To the world, David had it all: fortune, influence, and a life others could only dream of. But behind the walls of his opulent home, reality was far from perfect. Luxury could not mask the tension simmering between David and his wife, Amara. She was carrying their first child, a tiny life growing inside her that should have been a source of joy. Instead, her pregnancy, with all its changes, had slowly transformed the marriage. David, once captivated by Amara's beauty, could not accept the reality of how pregnancy affected her body. The late nights, the cravings, the stretch marks, the weight gain, and the fatigue, all natural parts of motherhood, he saw as a burden, a decline in her appearance. As weeks turned to months, David's dissatisfaction grew. He noticed the lines under her eyes, the way she moved more slowly, the softness that replaced the firmness he had admired. His admiration turned into contempt, his love replaced by frustration. Where he should have offered support and care, he allowed superficiality to dominate his thoughts. Gradually, his attention shifted outward. He began flirting with other women, seeking validation in the beauty and energy he no longer saw in Amara. One evening, after a small disagreement about household matters, David's temper flared. Harsh words, laced with his growing resentment, left Amara in tears. "You've changed," he said bitterly. "I can't even recognize you anymore. This isn't what I signed up for." The cruelty of his statement pierced her deeply. Her body carried their child, their future, yet he saw only what he thought she had lost. By the next morning, his decision was final. Coldly, he told her to leave the house. He gave her nothing but a few belongings, dismissing years of love and shared memories as if they were meaningless. Shocked, heartbroken, and trembling, Amara stepped into a world she had never imagined she'd face alone, carrying not just the weight of her unborn child, but the devastating realization that the man she loved could value beauty above love, loyalty, and life itself. Amara had nowhere to go. The city that had once seemed full of opportunities and promise now felt cold, vast, and unkind. Every street corner, every crowded bus, every hurried passerby reminded her of her isolation. She had left behind wealth, comfort, and a husband she had loved dearly, a man who now sought other women because in his eyes she was no longer beautiful enough. By a stroke of fate, or perhaps divine providence, she reached out to Tola, an old friend who had always been kind and dependable. Tola welcomed her into her modest apartment without hesitation. It was a small space with peeling paint and a creaky bed, but it was warm, safe, and filled with care. For the first time in days, Amara felt a flicker of hope. Yet, the nights were long and cold. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, a cruel reminder of the life she had left behind, and every pang seemed to echo David's betrayal. It wasn't just the physical hardships. It was the sting of knowing that the man she had loved and trusted had abandoned her for someone else, valuing superficial beauty over the woman who carried his child. She thought of his laughter, his once gentle eyes, now cold and distant, of the women he had chosen instead of her, of the life she had dreamed of and how easily it had been torn from her hands. Still, in the darkness, Amara discovered something extraordinary. Strength she had never known existed within her. Every small task became a triumph. Cooking simple meals, budgeting with barely enough money, and walking long distances through rain to reach work became acts of courage. She embraced the slow transformation of her body as a badge of motherhood, learning to love herself even as the world, and the man she had loved, had turned away. Her resilience grew in quiet, uncelebrated moments. When she felt hope kick for the first time, she smiled through tears, understanding that life had given her a reason to endure. When she laughed softly with Tola over shared meals, she felt the flicker of a life rebuilt. She journaled her fears, dreams, and small victories, reminding herself that she was no longer a victim. She was a survivor. Meanwhile, David's life continued in stark contrast. While he pursued women and validation outside his marriage, Amara faced the real consequences of his choices. He paraded wealth, smiled for cameras, and attended lavish parties, but cracks were beginning to show in his carefully constructed facade. Nights alone in his penthouse became intolerably long, and even surrounded by luxury, he felt hollow. The laughter of the child he had abandoned, the warmth he had rejected, and the life he had chosen to betray haunted him silently. Yet he ignored it, chasing superficial desires that offered no real fulfillment. Amara's struggles were not just survival, they were the forging of a new identity. She began to find work, small at first, learning to navigate the challenges of life without relying on anyone else. She met people who respected her for her character rather than her status, and slowly, her confidence returned. Every obstacle she overcame, every night she endured, became a stepping stone toward the woman she was meant to become. Strong, self-reliant, and fiercely protective of the life she now held sacred. Her pain, though deep, was transforming into purpose. David had thought her pregnancy, her body, and her responsibilities were burdens. In truth, they had shaped her into someone unbreakable. And while the man who had abandoned her continued to chase hollow pleasures, Amara was building something no one could take away. A life defined by resilience, love, and integrity. In those shadowed days, she realized a truth more profound than any luxury could teach. Hardship could break the weak, but it could also sculpt the strong. And Amara was determined that neither hunger, nor cold, nor betrayal would dim the light she carried inside. A light bright enough to illuminate not just her path, but hope's future as well. Months passed, and Amara's life began to transform in ways David could never have imagined. She gave birth to a healthy baby girl, tiny and perfect, whose presence instantly filled the empty spaces of her heart. She named her Hope, a name that symbolized survival, resilience, and the promise of a future untainted by betrayal. Every time Hope smiled or kicked, Amara felt a surge of strength, a reminder that life could still be beautiful even after heartbreak. The news of David's betrayal, his cold dismissal of Amara, his superficial obsession with her changing body, and his infidelity, quietly spread through social circles and the whispers of social media. Friends, business partners, and even family began to see him differently. Once admired for his confidence and charm, David was now perceived as a man blinded by vanity, one who discarded loyalty and love for fleeting pleasure. Amara, meanwhile, was rising from the shadows. She found work and began to make her own money, small at first, but steadily growing. Each paycheck, each independent decision, reinforced her sense of self-worth. She moved through the city with her head held high, not with arrogance, but with dignity born of experience. Every day, she became a woman shaped not by superficial beauty, wealth, or status, but by character, courage, and love for her daughter. David, in contrast, continued chasing shallow pleasures. The women he sought for validation could never fill the void left by the family he abandoned. His empire, once untouchable, began to show cracks. Investments he had considered sure things failed. Trusted partners, drawn more to his wealth than his loyalty, betrayed him. Lawsuits and financial disputes threatened the foundation of the life he had built on pride. For the first time, David experienced the vulnerability he had forced upon Amara. Nights alone in his penthouse became unbearable. The opulent walls and glittering cityscape offered no comfort against the emptiness gnawing at him. Every expensive meal, every party, every luxury purchase felt hollow. And in the quiet moments, he could hear a voice from his conscience, Amara's voice, whispering the truth he had ignored. Beauty fades, wealth can disappear, and choices rooted in selfishness bring inevitable consequences. One evening, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his empty apartment, David gazed at the city lights, feeling the weight of every poor decision he had made. He thought of Amara, strong and radiant despite everything he had done. He thought of Hope, the innocent child whose laughter he had never held close. He realized that the life he had abandoned was flourishing without him, proof that love, resilience, and integrity were far more powerful than vanity, wealth, or power. Meanwhile, Amara and Hope were thriving in ways David could never have predicted. Their home, though humble, was filled with laughter, warmth, and the quiet joy of a life built on honesty and strength. Amara's career was growing, and she had earned respect not for her wealth nor her beauty, but for her intelligence, compassion, and determination. Hope thrived under her mother's guidance, learning lessons of resilience and self-worth that David had never taught. The irony was unmistakable. David, who had abandoned love for superficial beauty, was now alone, faced with the full weight of the consequences of his actions. Karma had arrived not in whispers, but in the loud, undeniable proof that his choices had led to emptiness, heartbreak, and loss. The woman he had discarded had risen, stronger and brighter than ever, while he wrestled with hollowness he could not buy or charm his way out of. In the solitude of that evening, David understood a painful truth. Life does not reward vanity or betrayal. Love, loyalty, and integrity cannot be replaced by wealth, status, or fleeting desire. And for the first time he felt a flicker of fear, a realization that some lessons come not in whispers, but in the undeniable force of karma. Time had a way of shaping people, and for Amara, it had carved strength, resilience, and wisdom out of the pain she had endured. The frightened, dependent woman who had once allowed herself to be defined by David's shallow standards was gone. In her place stood a mother and a woman who understood her own worth, who carried herself with dignity, and who would fiercely protect her daughter, Hope, from the world, and from the man who had once betrayed them both. David, on the other hand, was a man humbled by loss. He had watched the empire he had built crumble, not just financially, but morally. The women he had sought to replace Amara's beauty with could not fill the void left by loyalty, love, and trust. Every night in his empty penthouse reminded him of what he had forsaken: the warmth of a home, the innocence of a child, and the love of a woman who had once been his world. Desperation eventually drove him to Amara. He reached out cautiously, arranging a meeting at a quiet, neutral location, away from prying eyes. The thought of facing her filled him with unease, but he knew he had to confront the consequences of his choices. The man who had once dismissed her because of the natural changes pregnancy brought to her body now stood before the woman who had survived his rejection and betrayal. When he saw Amara holding Hope, the realization of his failures hit him with full force. The child he had abandoned was vibrant, joyful, and full of life, a living testament to the love and perseverance he had scorned. Amara's eyes, calm and unwavering, reflected a strength and wisdom he could not have imagined. She was no longer the young bride whose beauty had once captivated him. She was a woman forged by hardship, unbroken and unafraid. "Amara," David began, voice low and strained. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I've been a fool, blind to the truth, and I hurt you more than I can ever put into words. I want to make amends, to try to fix what I've broken, if you'll allow me." Amara's gaze was steady. She did not flinch, did not cry, nor did she show anger. But there was no rush to forgive. Her life was no longer defined by David or the choices he had made. Her priority was Hope, her daughter's happiness, security, and future. She had built a life based on love, integrity, and resilience, and she would not risk that for a man who had once rejected her for superficial reasons and betrayed her with infidelity. "I hear your words, David," Amara said quietly, "but words alone cannot undo the pain you caused. They cannot erase the years you abandoned, the nights I spent alone, the sacrifices I made. My life now is about Hope. She is my focus, my priority. I cannot let your regrets dictate her future or mine." David felt the weight of her words like a physical blow. For the first time, he understood that no wealth, no charm, no apology could erase the consequences of his superficiality and betrayal. He had lost more than a wife. He had lost respect, love, trust, and the chance to witness the most precious moments of his child's life. He nodded silently, swallowing the sting of humility, and said softly, "I understand. I don't expect forgiveness. Maybe I don't deserve it. But I promise I will spend the rest of my life trying to become a better man. I will help where I can, support where it matters, and live differently. If nothing else, to honor what I destroyed." Amara allowed a small nod. She offered no promises, no guarantees. Her life had changed, her priorities had shifted, and she knew the path she had taken could not be undone. She had learned to rise above betrayal, to protect what was truly valuable, and to build a life unshaken by the mistakes of others. David walked away that day with no certainty, no assurance of reconciliation. But something within him had shifted. He understood at last that true redemption was not bought with money or charm. It was earned through humility, accountability, and the painstaking work of becoming the man he should have been all along. He had a choice: continue alone in his hollow empire, bitter and empty, or fight to rebuild himself from the inside out. And for the first time, he truly knew which path he needed to take. Amara watched him leave, her heart steady, her focus unwavering. She had survived the storm, she had protected her daughter, and she had grown into a woman no betrayal could ever diminish. The life she had fought to create was hers, strong, bright, and unbreakable, and no man, no matter how desperate for redemption, could ever take that from her. Years passed, and Amara's life blossomed in ways David could never have imagined. She had transformed her pain into purpose, building a life that radiated strength, independence, and dignity. She became a respected businesswoman, her decisions marked by intelligence, empathy, and integrity. Her work no longer depended on wealth or influence, but on her ability to lead, inspire, and create opportunities for others. Motherhood remained her greatest triumph. Hope, now a spirited, intelligent, and joyful young girl, grew up surrounded by love and laughter. Amara nurtured in her daughter the very qualities that had saved her own life: resilience, courage, and self-respect. Every bedtime story was a lesson in perseverance. Every gentle embrace a reminder that true beauty lay not in appearances but in strength, character, and love. Together, they created a home that was humble, yet rich in warmth, stability, and happiness. A home David had once abandoned, but one Amara had built from scratch with unshakable determination. David, meanwhile, had undergone a transformation of his own, though his journey was far more painful. Humiliated by his own superficiality, the collapse of his empire, and the loss of the family he had forsaken, he had learned lessons money could never buy. The women he had pursued in search of validation had never replaced what he lost, and he was forced to confront the truth he had avoided for so long: wealth and power cannot substitute for love, loyalty, and integrity. Humbled, he began quietly supporting charitable causes, investing in communities and initiatives that uplifted the lives of those who, like Amara, had suffered due to neglect or betrayal. He became a man who understood that true wealth lay in respect, empathy, and the love earned through actions rather than appearances. While he could never undo the pain he had caused, he worked tirelessly to ensure that his remaining years were spent atoning for past mistakes and leaving a legacy of meaningful impact. One day, fate orchestrated a meeting neither of them expected. Amara and Hope were walking through a sunlit park, their laughter ringing out freely. Hope ran ahead, chasing butterflies and giggling, her joy filling the air. David, passing by on business, froze when he saw them. The child he had never held, the life he had rejected, now embodied the very happiness and resilience he had failed to appreciate. Amara turned and saw him. Her gaze was calm, unwavering, and powerful. She had grown into a woman whose presence alone radiated confidence and inner strength. Gone was the frightened, obedient bride of years past. In her place stood someone who had risen from betrayal, heartbreak, and struggle, a woman whose life was defined by courage and love. David's heart clenched. For the first time in years, he felt truly powerless. He could no longer rely on charm, wealth, or superficial beauty to regain control. The woman before him and the child beside her represented everything he had squandered and all the lessons he had learned too late. Amara gave a small, measured nod. It was neither cold nor bitter, but strong, an acknowledgement that she had seen him, understood his presence, but would not allow him to disrupt the life she had fought so hard to build. Hope tugged at her hand, unaware of the gravity of the moment, reminding Amara that her focus remained steadfast on what truly mattered: love, security, and joy. David watched them walk away, a mixture of awe, regret, and humility filling his heart. He realized that some lessons in life are cruel, taught through loss and suffering, but the wisdom they leave behind is invaluable. He had learned the hard way that beauty fades, wealth is fleeting, and betrayal has consequences that no money can erase. True wealth, he now understood, lies in the bonds we nurture, the integrity we maintain, and the love we protect fiercely. Amara, with hope by her side, walked forward into a future of her own making. She had faced betrayal, endured hardship, and rebuilt a life stronger than the one she had lost. Her triumph was not measured in riches or societal approval, but in resilience, love, and the happiness she cultivated despite adversity. As David disappeared from view, he carried with him a profound understanding. Redemption is not guaranteed, forgiveness is earned, and the brightest lights in life, like Amara and hope, cannot be dimmed by arrogance, betrayal, or superficiality. And so life continued. Amara and hope thrived, a mother and daughter who had conquered despair and betrayal, showing the world that strength, love, and integrity are the true measures of a life well lived. The past, though painful, had forged them into unbreakable forces, ready to shine brightly in a world that could never take their resilience away. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to this channel for more emotional, inspiring African stories filled with lessons, bravery, and triumph. Every click helps these stories reach hearts around the world.